I'm a visual artist based out of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. I'm interested in the trope of allegory as a form of narrative style that allows me to illustrate complex ideas that are political, social, and other ideas that are easily understood by viewers. Becoming involved in what you said, our divine conversations, has been a natural progression for my need to tell stories. Around 9 years ago, I started a project that was called Allegory. And the series was an allegory for social conflict. And this is when I began to use mythological archetypes to represent ideas. I initiated a second series called Catalyst. I wanted to use this real catastrophe to start a dialogue about man's relationship to land and nature. I mentioned allegory earlier, and in this series in particular, the painting Doris Returns Stripped Bare. There's a few examples of this, such as when the wedding dress gestures towards the house in the sky. It has more than one meaning and can suggest an untethering of a person, Doris, to the material object, the home. While making the Catalyst series, I had a dream that was most memorable. It was etched into my mind because I don't usually dream about my own work. In the dream, I saw a classical sculpture surrounded by a chain link fence. I saw that I'd made these exceptionally large paintings that were different from my current work, which was impasto and thick. And in the dream, the paintings were thin. They were like drawings, a lot like grisailles. The images were of sculptures holding up architecture and were in front of a large body of water. So in 2016, later that year, I was awarded the Canadian Artist Residency at the Wars Museum in Athens, and I spent a month living and working in those magical spaces. And in the museum's folklore gallery, I found the clay reproductions of classical Greek sculptures. In that moment, I recognized how my dream had somehow unfolded. So my journey with Greek mythology deepened, and with each meeting, a specific myth character would come into focus that haunted and sometimes changed my practice. I began painting a new series called Passages in 2018. The first myth characters I explored were the Sirens and Athena. The Wars didn't have a specific large sculpture representing Athena, but they did have what they called a German Athena, which was a large relief bust that was embedded in the wall of the folklore galleries. This Athena at the Wars Museum had braids and an angular jaw and a prominent chin and deep-set symmetrical eyes. She reminded me of the bust holding the architecture in my dreams, so I took it as a sign to look for other Athenas in other countries. In 2018, I spent a month in London studying at the Royal College, and the theme of the summer course was called The Encounter. In the latter part of the trip, I traveled to Bath, England, where while visiting the Roman baths, I came across two versions of Athena. And the first was a shoulder-length bust made of stone that was above the outdoor bath. She had a stern and simple features, while the other was the most beautiful gold Athenian bust encased in glass in the basement of the building. I chose the latter, which I named Athena of the West, which was one of the works in the Passages series. My summer month in London was fortunate because there was a large retrospective of Rodin's sculptures juxtaposed with the antiquities. And outside the exhibition, I found a sculpture of Aphrodite, and in the sculpture, she extended her arm upwards, a gesture that suggested a dual meaning, either to condemn or to forgive. So when drawing the image that eventually became the Forbidden Aesthetic painting, for the portrait of Aphrodite, I placed the bust portrait of Camille, who was Rodin's assistant, underneath hers as a way of emphasizing both the dark and the light side of her character. I struggled with the initial stages of the painting. So one morning I took a walk to Chelsea and I came across the most magical sights, an entire garden of reproductions of sculptures from classical antiquity. And the many sculptures encouraged me to return to the studio, where I abandoned the initial plan and integrated them into the painting. I also changed the way I was working. I let go of my planned approach of gridding, completing, and fairly sizable underpainting and collage images. My summer in England with all the unexpected serendipitous encounters with Greek mythological figures, it changed the way in which I practice and my visual approach to telling stories. It also opened up new ways of integrating painting with drawing. When I returned to the state, I had more momentum than ever to continue my research with ancient Greek myths. So I installed a 60-foot newsprint on my 3 walls, and over a couple of weeks I developed a large drawing improvising stories about the fates Aphrodite, Apollo, and Icarus. This drawing is now the source for a new series that's in progress and that I'm calling Eclipse. Since then I've developed 4 paintings, including one where I layered the bust of the crying Aphrodite under my own portrait. The Fates is a diptych with a second piece in progress, and Dionysus was found in the Boboli Gardens in Florence, Italy, where I went in honor of Sargent's watercolors from the same garden. So I went there in late 2019 to develop a series of watercolors, which I completed in 2020. While making this series, the god Dionysus seemed to haunt me, so he has become a diptych in the Eclipse series. The richness of the Greek mythology continues to influence my work, and its protagonists and their deeds still resonate today, while the sculptural works from antiquity have opened up the way in which I practice. I've become more flexible with the painting process, integrating painting and drawing, and more I combine representation with abstraction. As a strategy to disrupt the image and wider interpretation, I also want the viewer to linger longer and to commit and make sense of it.